Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the Football Diary podcast in yet another topsy-turvy weekend of Premier League football in this crazy season. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Manchester United beating Manchester City and redeeming their Man City ticket this season like many teams have. But also, we're going to have to look at that Midlands clash between Forest and Villa, in which Villa came off second best, unfortunately, in, let's just say, controversial circumstances, shall we, Myles, and leave it there. First of all, how are you, mate?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. It's true, isn't it? It feels like it's harder and harder to pick an agenda each week at the moment. We keep getting so many odd results to talk about.
Really is odd, isn't it? And the shape of the table just changes day by day because there's so much football at the minute as well. So yeah, we'll try and analyse the games that have made the biggest impact. Obviously, Liverpool drawing 2-2 with Fulham, despite being down to 10 men, which was really impressive for them. And Crystal Palace's renaissance continuing as they beat Brighton 3-1. But managerial sackings, I think, is where we'll start, Myles, because 2 in a day feels excessive, doesn't it? But both of these sackings, Gary O'Neill, first of all, with Wolves after their implosion recently, didn't seem surprising, really, did it? And obviously, Russell Martin at Southampton after their latest thrashing too is another one that felt like it should have happened a while ago, really.
Yeah, the Wolves one, I think Gary O'Neill felt he was resigned to it himself, didn't he, for the last couple of weeks? And you can see that the wheels have been coming off ever since the summer. It's a shame because I think we all were quite pleasantly surprised by how well O'Neill did last year. And I think at the start of the season, both you and I had him to go down last year when Lopetegui left so late on. And then O'Neill did a really good job to stabilise ship. And then the summer was turbulent, it's safe to say. They lost a lot of key members of the team. And they just haven't found any consistency since then. Injuries have really dampened any progress they were going to make. And you look at the performances on the pitch, you look at the discontent amongst the fans. I mean, the chaos after this game, even. You just think the writing's on the wall, and O'Neill's probably better off moving on, and Wolves are probably better off looking elsewhere. It's one that it just makes sense, this departure, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, losing to Ipswich as well, I think, is a hammer blow too, because that leaves them, quite comfortably second bottom now, Wolves. And you keep thinking after their difficult run of fixtures at the start of the season that they just need to win these so-called winnable games, and they just haven't. In fact, the last few games defensively, they've been woeful. And like you say, the way they finished the game from a discipline point of view and the stuff that was going on after the game with, Aït-Nouri grabbing the Ipswich coach's glasses and stuff like that, it just looked really unsavoury. And they did it in the previous game too, so felt like the wheels were coming off. And when they spoke to Gary O'Neill after the game, he had the sound of a man who knew that this wasn't going right, and he probably expected it too. But yeah, sad to see. But I think O'Neill's one of them coaches, I don't think he'll struggle to find work. It's just a question of where. But for Wolves' next step, where do they go now? I mean, it's been lined up by the sounds of it, hasn't it?
Yeah, Vitor Pereira is coming in by the looks of things, who's a proper journeyman. It feels like this is probably a Mendes deal, isn't it? I worry about Wolves with this appointment as well, because you've got someone that's completely untested in this league, and I think his biggest achievements were, 10 years ago, where he's won the Portuguese title twice and I think the Greek title once as well. It's not necessarily someone that I can see shining for Wolves. And you look at that squad, it's so mismatched, and I just don't feel like it's setting them up for any better success. I think, if anything, this probably confirms that they're going to go down, which I don't think anyone would have called at the start of the season, really. But they've got a couple of sort of star players in that team that you look at and think they could do really well at any kind of club in the Premier League. Like Cunha is fantastic. Aït-Nouri, you mentioned, obviously, the trouble after the game, but he's a fantastic player. And we've seen some really good performances from those two in particular this season and of late. And if someone can come in and get the best out of that squad, fantastic. But they're so short in key areas that what's a new manager going to do to solve their defensive problems until the January window? And actually, would it have been better to hold on to Gary O'Neill for just a couple more weeks and try and support him in January, because you didn't support him in the summer? And I don't know, maybe he felt like he was owed that after last year. I can't work out whether they've timed this well or really poorly. It felt like they should have probably done it a month or two ago if they were going to, or just waited and let it go, because I don't think anyone is necessarily in a position to do better than O'Neill was doing with that squad.
No, that's the thing. Who's going to take the squad and who's going to take the scenario that they're in? And that's the challenge, really. Clearly, a journeyman Portuguese coach is the answer to that question. But it's a random one, isn't it? And I feel for O'Neill, and I think he's one of those coaches that wins respect, because he speaks from the heart, doesn't he? And he seems to be too honest sometimes, I think, with the way things are going. He was dealt a pretty crappy hand in the summer, like you say. So, yeah, a bit of a when's the right time for him and for Wolves. He's got no choice now because Wolves have moved on, and it's sad for them, and the fans must be in complete disarray at the minute. But not as much as Southampton's fans, really. Actually, word on Ipswich first, because they deserve the plaudits. Obviously, they're, I think, living proof of how a team like Southampton have got no excuses, because Ipswich's squad, it keeps being said, so many of those players were there in League One, in the Championship, and they've come up through both those leagues, and yet another player scored in Taylor, who has been through all the divisions and scored in all of them for them. So an incredible achievement. I think McKenna's kind of an example of how to kind of translate that kind of ethos into the Premier League and still do it pragmatically and successfully.
Yeah, it shows you what a positive attitude can get you in these kinds of games as well.
Yeah.
Because actually, Wolves were on top for the majority of the second half and knocking on the door, but their confidence is so shot that it meant that nothing was really going for them. Whereas Ipswich, it felt like the chances they got, they took. I mean, even the first goal was so comical. But it does come from the persistence, the positive attitude of Delap and Hutchinson to just keep pressing that ball and trying to get it as close to the Wolves' goal as possible. They invite the pressure on the Wolves' defence, and that positivity, despite not always getting the results that we'd expect from Ipswich, or they kind of look like they deserve in games, the fact that McKenna's got them so well drilled and keeps them going until the 90th minute. Obviously, that didn't work out from last week. This week it does, and it feels like a really deserved victory just on the basis of your work ethic and your style of play. Entitles you to some points eventually, and Wolves could learn a lot from that.
Yeah, well, so could Southampton too. Like we say, Southampton losing 5-0 to Spurs, all goals scored in the first half. First time I've seen a stadium empty at half time, and like, it was such a strange scenario, wasn't it? And I struggle to know what direction Southampton are going to go now as well. Like, do they appoint a firefighter? Should they have just persisted with Martin and thought, well, his approach to sticking to his playing style is a little bit Vincent Kompany, and he's now Bayern Munich manager. So is Russell Martin as good as we think he might be? Is he flawed? Is he just plain stubborn? What is going on there?
The fans didn't seem happy, did they? There was
not at all.
Banners out saying they wanted him gone. And it's always difficult, isn't it? When you get a club promoted and then you fail in the Premier League, you remove that quickly. It does feel a bit harsh, but they gave him a fair amount of time. Like, we've seen managers go a lot quicker than this from promoted sides. Like, we are in mid-December now, and it is getting serious. If Southampton have real ambition to try and turn this around and stay in the league, then I can see why they would make a change. I think with Burnley, they always sort of saw last year as we're just glad to be here, and we'll take the money and we'll use that to build a more secure future. So there's no point in removing Kompany, even if the results are poor. Whereas for Southampton, they've been up and down between the Premier League and the Championship multiple times. They are looking to try and solidify, and that clearly wasn't coming in this current setup. I don't necessarily know if the right coach is out there for them now, because I don't know who would want to take that job. Like, I think tough. David Moyes is like the third favourite, but he doesn't want this job because he could get a relegation on his CV, and he doesn't really need that. There's probably going to be, with no disrespect to Southampton, a bigger club or a bigger job available in the not so distant future that someone like that could take. I mean, I'll be honest, if it wasn't too soon, Gary O'Neill could do worse. Because
wouldn't that be odd?
It would be, but it would be the right sort of club to try and build something up at, wouldn't it? Because you kind of...
True.
I think anyone kind of gets this season as a bit of a free hit now as Southampton manager, as long as it's not straight losses. If they go down, they go down and can say it's because of the way they started. But they're a club with ambition. They're a club with a budget that's too big for the Championship. So if someone like O'Neill wants to build his reputation up, that wouldn't be a bad shout. There's a couple of Championship managers being touted for it as well, isn't there?
I think they need to kind of future-proof themselves, because they're by far the worst team in the division.
Yeah.
I think they should be looking to next season and expecting them to go down and to have to take a hit in their budget and not go full throttle in January, because I think that'd be a waste of money. I really do. They've got to kind of play it pragmatically and have a coach that reflects that, not necessarily somebody that's going to fight a fire like David Moyes. The fire's been burning far too long. They're too far gone. So yeah, Southampton need to move on, I think, and just prepare for life outside the Premier League, because they're probably as bad as Sheffield United were in their relegation season.
I think worse.
Do you think?
I honestly think worse. The only difference is you can see at Southampton there's some really good young players there that it's probably a step too soon for them right now, or maybe they're not in the right squad. But if you think about Harwood Bellis, obviously is now an England international. I don't know how. I don't think he's anywhere near good enough for that level yet. But clearly has a future ahead of him. Diblin looks excellent on the wing. He'll remain in the Premier League if he wants to leave Southampton. Cameron Archer would do incredibly well in the Championship for them next year. So there is something there that they could build on at least, and they'd probably make a bit of money. They'd probably sell Walker Peters and make a bit of money there as well. So there is a foundation in that squad. There's some talent there. It just doesn't look coherent right now. So I don't know. I think it's probably too late to turn it around and all of a sudden be surviving. But someone could probably get something out of them at least.
Yeah, they need to finish on a positive, but without too high an expectation and too much pressure on the next coach. Really, they should just go. Let's just make a good account of ourselves, in my opinion. Yeah, O'Neill gone, Martin gone. Is Pep Guardiola next? Is the question. I have to lead in with that because I'm so smug right now. I mean, Man City 1, Man United 2 was a poor game of football for the neutral.
Shocking.
But I'm still on a high from Ahmad's scuffed winner. The timing of it, the euphoria has carried me so far through this Monday. But yeah, Pep's not having a good time at the minute. I think 1 win in 11 in all competitions is an awful run. And what's the stat? The lowest points tally out of any club since the 1st of November.
Those points per game, yeah.
Points per game. That's not Man City that we know, is it? So a shocking set of results lately for Man City that doesn't seem to be turning either. But for United, I think this is one of those games where I didn't know what to expect. It's the first time we've played City and felt like at least on a level with them, but probably slightly more favourites for this game going into it. I think that's fair to say. A scrappy performance all round, but I think more desire at the end of the day and slightly more quality in a game that lacked it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit harsh to say Ahmad's scuffed winner as well. I thought it was outstanding play.
Well, he said after the game he didn't hit it cleanly enough, and he didn't when you watch it in slow motion, but the control and the finish itself was
the touch
good
over
enough.
Edison was something else.
Yeah.
And he is just showing why so many Man United fans, you and Dave included, have just been calling for him to be starting more regularly and making Ten Hag look quite foolish. Really, it's excellent. He obviously suits Amorim incredibly well. I think in a week where Rashford and Garnacho were ousted from the squad, he took the opportunity to shine, and someone needed to in this game. It was woeful. It was such a poor game, and Man City. I don't know. Should we focus on Man United for a bit, or can we just go straight into what the heck is going down with this meltdown? Because
a lot of the story is about Man City and how bad they were. Because I mean, even their opening goal was pretty fortuitous. It was a deflected cross that Gvardiol just happened to be in the right place for, stoop the header in. But beyond that, they didn't threaten a lot, did they? They looked really abject.
Yeah, and it's so weird how quickly it's turned. Because, okay, you can say, right, the cycle that Pep has is coming to an end and it will be exhaustive being part of a Guardiola team and system for so long. And a lot of those players have been there for a really long time. You can also say they definitely didn't refresh the squad well enough in the summer. They let players go. They didn't bring enough in. I agree with that. You can talk about the impact of Rodri's injury. Absolutely. They are 3 massive factors that would make a team struggle in these settings. But there's still so much quality in that squad that you can't account for this level of a drop-off. So it's, 8 losses in the last 11?
Yeah.
That's
1 win, couple of draws. That is it.
It's relegation form.
Yeah.
And I think it's something like throughout Pep's Premier League career, he's lost on average like 1 in 8. And at the moment, he's losing 1 in 3 this season in the Premier League.
Yeah,
and it's worse than that if you span it to all competitions. And you're talking about there, the midfield looking completely empty. Like Gundogan's come back in, not really settled. Nunes is nowhere near the quality that they need him to be, and he cost them dearly in this game. Yeah. Walker, I'm actually sad to see it. Like, he's not the most likeable character, but for his footballing contributions and what we've seen him capable of for both Man City and England, one of the best right backs of a generation, has crumbled into nothing, it feels like, overnight. Edison, I don't know what's going on with him. A poor goalkeeper all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think, well, it's a collective drop of confidence, I think, isn't it? I mean, yes, form has dropped, but it's all at the same time. And that's rare with teams, especially top-level teams like this. And I genuinely think Guardiola doesn't know what to do.
And that to me, I know this sounds an odd thing to say about someone like Pep Guardiola, such poor coaching.
Yeah,
How
sounds
can
defeated.
you not lift this team up? Like, this run now, I mean, I say all this, they're playing Villa at the weekend, and then inevitably they'll smash at us, and it'll be so frustrating.
Careful, mate. Careful what you say.
Yeah, exactly. But when you've still got the talent in the squad. Foden was player of the season last year. Where's he gone? Like, look at, a lot of people have started pointing out, if you look at Grealish now, it looks embarrassing as a signing.
I think Grealish in Villa form and even recent England form would be by far the most catalytical player in this team. Like, he could spark something, but
he's not doing it when he comes on. He's not doing it. It's so weird.
But it feels like they're so conditioned to try and do it the way they've always done it, and they just can't. And I think it's like somebody described Guardiola at the moment as that player on Football Manager who has the same tactic and finds success with it for years and wins everything. Suddenly they stop winning and go, I haven't got another tactic. I don't know what to do now. But the lack of flexibility and depth is really shocking for City. And you're right, the signings they've made have not been great.
No.
I've not seen enough of Doku to be impressed by his end product or his contribution, or to even suggest that he's worthy of a top team so far.
Or Savinho.
I know it's early days. Savinho as well. Yeah, not the usual Man City calibre. Obviously, De Bruyne is coming back to some kind of fitness now, and he does produce flashes of absolute brilliance with the right pass every now and again. But again, he looks tired. A few of them just look so sapped of confidence and energy. And how he answers that is going to be pivotal to their season. And I think you suggested, didn't you, on our WhatsApp group, that maybe in January they'll back him big and go, right, okay, you've earned the right to have this moment. That's fine. But we can't fall off any further. Here's 150, 200 million to go and boost the team. I'm not sure whether that's going to work, though, still.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I wonder if he regrets signing the contract. Because he looks tired. Like, he said after this game that he's not good enough.
Yeah.
Which is a very odd comment. I mean, he's odd. And then, like, the other week, with all the scratches on his head and his face during the game, like, I wonder if he is now feeling a bit like Jurgen Klopp was last year, where he's just fatigued from it all. And he thinks that maybe it would have been a better time for him to walk away on a high. But with that contract extension, it means he kind of has to try and go again. And I do wonder whether in January they spend the Alvarez money, at least. I don't think they're going to go out and spend 200 million in January, because when do you ever see that? But they probably could go out and sign another holding midfielder, maybe another attacking option, and then wait till the summer to do more if they're going to do that. But also, are they still being really cautious not to spend money because of the optics around the charges that are looming? And maybe this is a bit of justice. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a shame. And I don't want to take away from Man United. They got the win. They hung in the game, and in the second half they were the better side, definitely. If you can say there was a better side. And it's a really positive result for Amorim. I mean, it's 2 wins in a row against Man City for him. It's good timing. I think that's what the club needed. And the fact that he made quite drastic squad decisions and it paid off and you won, that's only going to endear him more to the fan base as well. Because although Rashford is Manchester's boy and Garnacho's been like the new superstar, he's not pulled any punches. It's worked, and I think the fans will want to see that. And he's not ousted him from the squad in the same sort of manner that we've seen previously with like Jadon Sancho. Like, I think he's already said they'll be back next week, but it does send a message of, you probably wanted to be a part of this game. Well, not right now.
And we've done it without you as well. I think that's a big message. The fact that they did it in the fashion they did so dramatically, and a player like Ahmad, who's come in and been pretty much sidelined by Ten Hag for the majority of the season, inexplicably after starting so well, proves a big point as well. And I think, a word on Amorim, I think that's the big positive for me, is that he deals with the media, and I guess therefore the players, in such a really calm and logical way, and makes decisions that don't feel like you can't explain why he's done it. Even in game, like, the substitutions are made at a good time, and a time when we feel like we need those players coming on. He makes changes to the starting 11 that seem to just make sense. And this new system he's got as well, with the wing backs bombing forward and holding midfielders, seems to be quite balanced as well. So yes, it's going to have some teething problems, and we haven't really got the quality to kind of play it like that yet. But we're getting there, and I think he's trying things, and I think United fans are giving him some time to kind of show that, as long as he is making decisions that seem to make sense. And so far, I feel like he's doing that.
Yeah, and I also love this new role of Rasmus Højlund as a social media troll as well. He's enjoying that. No, there's some players that are really shining already. Like, we talked about it last week, I think, that Agate, obviously, we always expected that he would look good under Amorim. They've worked together before. I think he's really shining. Mazraoui is having a great time at Man United. I think he looks excellent. And, of course, Ahmad. And those three settling in so quickly helps build United up. But actually, across the pitch, there's a lot of players that are accounting really well for that system. You just feel bad for Mason Mount. It's a real shame that he gets his chance and ultimately has to come off so early. And I do still wonder where Bruno fits this system.
I don't think he does long term.
Yeah.
I think he's not the kind of coach at Almiron to take the captaincy away from him now, mid-season.
No.
I think he'll let the season play out. He'll prove the point that he doesn't quite work in the system the way he has done, because he's looked pretty poor in most of the games so far under him. And I think that is partially down to the system, but also I think he's knackered too. I thought Bruno's played a lot of football. But I think ultimately, I don't think he'll feature in a United midfield soon, which is sad. But again, for the greater good, it seems to make some sense. But enough Manchester talk, I think. Liverpool maintain their lead at the top of the Premier League, despite drawing against Fulham 2-2, which sounds like a game of lost points in some context, doesn't it? But when you consider that Andy Robertson was sent off after, 15 minutes for a straight red, it looks more of a remarkable point, doesn't it, really? And I think Liverpool have been like that this season, where results against the odds and getting points like this out of nowhere, I mean, they've only drawn 3 games, to be fair, they've won so many, is showing that they've got the credentials to win the title. Yes, the teams around them seem to be falling off left, right and centre, but Liverpool are still doing it, aren't they?
They are, though it looks like a bit of a slump. Draw to Fulham, draw to Newcastle. No, I'm only joking. I have to say that just because I have to get some sort of criticism.
If that's a slump, then I think they'll take that. I think the rest of the Premier League looks stark in contrast to Liverpool right now.
Absolutely, yeah. It's fantastic for them to kind of get through these occasions and these tests. And I think they are in a great commanding position now, because no one seems to be able to capitalise on it, even when they do drop points. And that's the most telling thing. I actually watched this game with a friend of mine who's a Liverpool fan, and he started the game by saying how the reason Arsenal weren't going to compete for the title was because they dropped points in games like this. And when Liverpool do it, it does still kind of feel like a victory. It's an odd one, isn't it? Like, I'm sure we'll give Fulham some credit later on, but we saw some of the best parts of Liverpool. We saw the depth that their squad has. Like, as soon as Jota came on, it felt predictable that he was going to get a goal. Like, he's such a clinical finisher. He's such an underrated player in the Premier League. I think he's one of the best forwards that we really can see. And that injury is such a shame that it's set him back even now, because I think Slot would have been using him pretty much consistently in every game otherwise. But the options Liverpool have are so fierce that, they always have something new to throw at you. And Slot seems to be really good at adapting and working that out for each game. And he showed that by managing a game with 10 men for most of it. Because Fulham were good throughout the game. They posed a lot of threats to Liverpool. I think after they were 1-0 up, they sat back a little bit. And then when Liverpool equalised, they just went at them again and they really put on an attack. And Liverpool had to find some answers, and ultimately they did.
It was a great game for that reason, though, because it enabled Fulham to come out a little bit more and attack, but it also created space for Liverpool as well. So you didn't feel like it was 11 versus 10 at some times, and that's credit we need to give to Liverpool, really. They made it feel like an even playing field still. But Liverpool, 2 great goals as well. I think Salah continues to produce some incredible passes, and his goal, his cross for Gakpo's finish was incredible. And Jota as well, like you said, his finish was great too. Going forward, they're irresistible, aren't they? And probably the best attack in the league at the minute, bar none, I think. I mean, who's even close to them?
Probably the best in Europe right now that we're seeing. Yeah. Really, I mean, the 2 league tables suggest that, don't they? They're absolutely dominating across the pitch. And even though last week it wasn't the most convincing of wins in the Champions League, the fact that they're still producing these results when the fixture calendar is getting a bit tighter as well. Obviously, the Everton game getting called off last week gave them a bit more respite as well. But they look fantastic, and I think they'll probably have one eye on the January window to cement this position now, because they didn't do a lot in the summer, really. They brought Chiesa in, obviously, and there's still talks of them wanting to bring another midfielder in, but I don't think they would have anticipated that they were in a position where they might be winning multiple competitions. And now that they look like that's an achievable thing, maybe they'll think, right, let's kind of kick on from here and start this process earlier than we thought we would under Slot.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Champions League performances as well, it's just been an all-round incredible season. They've barely dropped off at all, which is credit to them. But let's give some credit to Fulham, like you say, because they were worthy opponents in this game, and some great performances again. I thought Andres Pereira's goal was really good. Really thought they were, and Muniz as well, his little cheeky flick as well.
Great flick.
Some good goals in this game, but I think Anthony Robinson's one of those players so far that seems to be the shining star for them in the minute. He gets forward so often. His balls in are fantastic. what a prospect he seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, 2 assists in this game.
Great.
He's wearing the captain's armband for Fulham now, and he really is leading from by example. He's probably the best left back in the league right now. I can't think of anyone that's kind of surpassing his performances. I know Cucurella is having a pretty decent season, and yeah, I think for Fulham to have talent like that in their squads, you can see why the quality of the Premier League is improving. Like it does feel really competitive this year because a lot of teams have picked up players like this and are developing them, bringing in better coaches, and we're seeing the kind of parity come back a little bit. There's still a big gap, obviously, between the top sort of 2 or 3 teams and the rest. But the fact that Fulham are able to take points off the likes of Liverpool and Arsenal, and the fact that you've got someone like Robinson who looks like he would fit into either of those sides really comfortably at this point, it's excellent for them. And if they can hold on to Marco Silva and they can hold on to Robinson and keep bringing Smith Rowe through and Pereira stays and they can get more goals out of Muniz as well, this is a really frightening Fulham side, and they're showing that on their day they can play anyone really and get something out of it.
Yeah, that block of teams around sort of 5th to 10th is crazy, isn't it? I think they are 3 points off Man City in 5th, which is incredible. This season just keeps going so off on so many tangents and so many possibilities, especially for teams like Nottingham Forest. I have to segue into that one, mate. Their win against Villa was euphoric for them, for obviously reasons we'll talk about later, but the nature of the late goal meant that them being propelled into the top 4 was even more satisfying. But before we talk about Forest, let's talk about Villa, shall we? I'm really confused by Emi Martinez, first of all, because that save off the line, somehow turning and scooping and getting it out off the line with his fingers all in one fell swoop. In full flow, it looked difficult to kind of get your head around. But in slow motion, I mean, how many times I watch it, I'm like, how did he do that? And then he goes and, I think, kind of really fumbles a little bit for the Milenkovic goal. I think he should have done better for that. Tell me your thoughts.
He's the best goalkeeper in the world.
On that evidence of that save,
the save is incredible, and it's the second time we've seen him do it in the last few games because he did the same thing against Juve as well. His reflexes like that are fantastic. The goal is unfortunate. Martinez has got a tendency to try and catch everything, and I felt like he tried to just get everything on it, both hands onto that ball, and it came at him at such a pace from so close that he was never going to be able to do that. So I don't know whether you blame him for it or whether it was just an excellent, powerful header from Milenkovic, a bit of both. But look, Martinez wins Villa far more points than he ever would cost us. I don't think you can put much fault on the result on him. And that save is a perfect representation of the kind of keeper he is. It's theatrical. It's incredible. And that's so him. Like, that's him as a character all over, isn't it? Like, he's world class. I actually wonder internally if there's an argument to say he's almost like Villa's best ever player, because he's a player that's won the World Cup, he's won 2 Copa Americas, he's won an individual award that states he is the best player in the world in his position 2 years in a row. Have we ever had a player that has achieved that? Or at least, okay, I'm 30, so came after our European success. But at least in that era, 100%, hands down. People talk about Grealish and the money that he was worth, and Dwight York and the impact he had in the Premier League. For me, Martinez, I think he's probably the best player I've seen in a Villa shirt, and it's just weird to see that the goalkeeper.
You'll take the rough with the smooth then, based on that.
It's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
I think, well, before we talk about the game itself, let's talk about the flashpoints. Now, Elliot Anderson had a pretty big part to play in this game, didn't he? Fair to say. Flashpoint number 1. Talk me through the penalty that wasn't a penalty, that wasn't given, and the holding back of, was it Morgan Rogers, wasn't it, in the box? Started off just outside the box, continued for what felt like a little while. Rogers goes down, nothing's given. I've seen a split opinion on this. Obviously, between neutral fans, it's pretty split. But what's the take on this? Why wasn't it given officially?
Okay, let me just clarify something before I do this, because I've had constant debates with Forest fans for the last week, over the last couple of days, and I think it's important to say I don't agree with the way that these decisions are made that we're going to talk about. I do think Forest deserve to win this game, and do not begrudge them the win because ultimately they were the better team, particularly late on. Fine. My issue is with the refereeing, of course, and the consistency that it's applied. So the Rodgers won. VAR have stated in the match that the reason they didn't give it was because it didn't impact the attacker and wasn't.
It went down.
It wasn't sustained for long enough to have an impact on him.
Okay.
Now, that's nonsense. You can see how tight of a grip Anderson has on Rodgers and clearly pulls him down. Rodgers probably does make the most of the fall, which maybe doesn't help his case for it, but ultimately it is a foul. Had VAR said, we're not going to give this penalty because Rodgers fouls Anderson first, not one Villa fan argues with that. He does foul him. He has such a tight grip of like the neck of Anderson's shirt that it's obviously a foul. So I'm not annoyed that the penalty wasn't given. I agree that it should not have been a penalty because of that. I just find VAR and the refereeing standards so frustrating because they don't seem to be able to apply their own rules to the game, and that's where fans get frustrated, and that's why it opens this debate up. Because if you look at that incident isolated, it's a penalty. Of course it is.
Well, that's the only replays you see is that moment. But fair play for sort of admitting a bit of balance there that, okay, the whole movement, the whole motion, the whole tussle and coming together was fairly kind of like bit of this and bit of that, 50-50, pretty even. But for the refs to focus on that is the reason feels a bit ludicrous because that was blatantly not true. And then the winner itself, obviously the timing of it is really important. So the ref has to get this right. But Anderson's challenge, should we call it, what do you make of that before the goal actually gets given, before the cross goes in, before the goal? Is it a challenge? Is it a foul? What are the arguments against it being a foul? And what are your thoughts, dare I ask?
This is, again, where you can see how unfit for purpose VAR and the standard of refereeing in the Premier League are right now, because this shouldn't be a debate. I can't believe we're even having to talk about this, because it's a foul.
Well, it kind of hacks Cash, basically, doesn't it?
It's so clear. Honestly, I found myself going mentally even arguing this with Forest fans because take your club out of it for 5 seconds. You cannot look at it and say that it's not a foul. I've seen Cash was looking for the contact. Anderson wins the ball. He doesn't. I've slowed it down. You can look on my blue sky. I've slowed down and showed you the footage and you can see the stills where he clearly makes no contact with the ball until he's thrown Cash over. He comes through the back of him or to the side of him slightly, pushes one side down and puts his leg round him and pushes him over it. It's a bit like when you're at school and one of your mates goes on all fours behind another kid and you push him and he goes over it. That's the sort of mechanism he's got on Cash. Yeah,
there's no way Cash can stay on his feet after that. And I think that's the measure of it being a foul, in my opinion. And obviously what follows is a deathly blow for Villa. Like it kills the game. It's the winner and there's no time to recover from it. So I think with that in mind, it has to be looked at VAR and it has to be looked at with some real scrutiny. I don't think that was the case.
No, of course it wasn't, because you look at that once as a referee and you go, oh no, that was a foul. Because you can see it. Anderson steps over the ball. He doesn't touch the ball. You can see it. I slowed it down and showed people. You see the spin of the ball and the direction it's going in. It does not change. And if there's any contact on it, it changes. But it doesn't. The only time it changes is after Cash has gone down, his leg falls on top of the ball. Still not Anderson. And that stops the ball still. And then Anderson takes it and puts the ball in for the winner. It's so clearly a foul. And the problem is, again, Forest probably did deserve the win on the basis of the game, but they didn't deserve that goal. And it's pushed Forest into the top four, taken a point off Villa, and ultimately that can be incredibly costly. It levels out across the course of a season. There's definitely decisions that we'll get that we probably shouldn't across this season. But isn't that the problem? Shouldn't we just look at this and go, yeah, they're getting this right 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100? And actually it feels like we're closer to 6 times out of 10. It's so poor. I just thought it was ridiculous.
Okay, that incident, well, those incidents aside, not that you can just put them aside and talk about it without mentioning them, but where it leaves Villa in the table, obviously in 6th now, and I think, 3 points outside the top 4, which is now Forest position. How are you feeling about the season? It feels like it's a season to not panic in any situation right now. There's plenty of football to play and not enough points, not enough daylight, I think, between any teams to kind of go, top 4's out of the question.
If you'd said to me in mid-December we would look like we're going to qualify automatically in the Champions League and not have to go through the playoff round, and we would be 2 points behind Man City, I'd be telling you that's an excellent start to the season. So I'll take it as that. Look, this game just highlighted a couple of the issues that we have within our squad. Mings was meant to play this game and then was ill, so that meant defensively we missed another option again. And some of those players aren't quite up for the standard that Villa are trying to raise to. That goal, for example, that we're talking about, yes, there's a foul. Let's take that out for a second. You have to put a lot of blame on Villa. They played themselves into that problem. Carlos, once again, incredibly lacklustre on the ball. Doesn't look like he's got any real effort into it. And at that point, Forest have scored a late equaliser. You do not want to lose that game. You want to do everything you can to make sure that you come away with something away from home. And he plays this awful pass in the direction of Cash whilst basically not moving, and it gives the ball away and invites attacking pressure from Forest. And then Concert does the same thing from right back, like in the same phase of play. And you're seeing that squad is starting to look tired, and a couple of them don't really look up to it. And if we don't bring in a right-sided centre-back or a right-back to allow Concert to move back to centre-back, we are going to really struggle to compete where we want to be competing. But ultimately, you have to just be happy with the position. It was always going to be hard to maintain the league form, but we're doing so well in the Champions League, and it's still in touching distance, the top four.
Yeah.
It's not like we're in Spurs' position. Like, we're sixth. That's not bad.
No, or Newcastle's when they were struggling with Champions League football as well. Yeah. The drop-off hasn't been as great as some have kind of thought it would be or predicted it would be. But the squad depth needs to improve, I think. It'd be interesting to see what Emery does in January and how much he's allowed to spend as well.
I think there's a real point to be made of, it looked like we were going to bring a right back in the summer and then we couldn't get it over the line financially. And the fact that he's now moved Matty Cash to like a right wing role, I really like that. I think Cash looks excellent there. I think he looks really threatening, far more threatening than we've seen Leon Bailey look this season, unfortunately, because he constantly wants to get the ball into the box. I mean, you saw it against Leipzig. That's where McGinn's goal came from. He wants to beat a man, Cash. He wants to get to the byline and he'll whip a ball in where Bailey looks like he's often losing it. But if we are progressing our one recognised right back further up the pitch, then we absolutely have to address who goes behind him. I don't mind Conser there necessarily, but while that then leaves Carlos in the back four, that's not good enough. We've got to make some sort of change there.
Fair enough, fair assessment. But Nottingham Forest fans, on the other hand, will be absolutely dreaming at the minute. We talk a lot about Forest, won't we? So quickly, we won't give them too much more exposure. They've had plenty from us, but fourth place in the Premier League is, you don't have to think of it as a flash in the pan now. I think Forest are definitely competing, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you saw one of the things that's really going to play in for them is that depth in their attacking line that we mentioned before. Like, we all said at the start of the season that having options like Hudson-Odoi and Elanga on the wings is so threatening. And then Elanga's not necessarily starting and not featuring as much as we thought he would, and came off the bench and turned this game upside down. I mean, they had an earlier equaliser disallowed by the tightest offside you could imagine, where Elanga was absolutely instrumental, and then he goes on to get the winner as well. And the fact that Forest can boast options like that, well, yeah, of course they're going to compete high up in the league, because they're bringing the best out of players that a lot of other clubs didn't want to take a punt on. Like, United looks silly letting Elanga go, in my mind. I think he's such a good winger. And then you look at me and Dave talked last week, and I know you've said it as well, like the defence that they're building. Milenkovic has now scored in 2 games in a row. He's coming up with crucial moments. Murillo's still fantastic. This Forest team is brilliant. We're seeing the best of Morgan Gibbs-White as well, again in this game. The alert kind of attitude he has to everything and always looking to move the ball forward, that's where Milenkovic's goal comes from. So, yeah, fair play, Forest. Honestly, it's funny, I've been arguing with Forest fans about the goal constantly, but I have to always come away from the conversation and go, but to be fair, I'm happy to see you doing well, because they deserve it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those teams that's been through so much turmoil in the last decade. Well, not even the last decade, the last 30 years. It's the highest they've been in the Premier League for 30 years. So, yeah, it's been that long since they've enjoyed this kind of height. So enjoy it, Forest fans, and let's see where it takes you, honestly. We talk about the best of the rest in the Premier League. We've been through all the major action. But starting with Brighton 1, Palace 3, and then Chelsea 2, Brentford 1. Newcastle 4, Leicester 0, and Arsenal dropping points to Everton 0-0. A mixed bag of results there, but let's start with Brighton versus Palace, this weird derby that isn't a derby. An amazing result for Palace amongst a string of increasingly impressive results. They've snatched points in games where I didn't expect them to get points. Their performances are looking better and better. Oliver Glasner is a stickler for his system, but it's absolutely working so far. Ismail Assar looks transformed, doesn't he? What a player. Those wing-backs as well. Daniel Munoz is fantastic. Tyrick Mitchell, what a player he is. They look so threatening going forward now. Then it's finally coming forward. It's like coming through for them. It's like the dam has burst and the pressure's paying off and the results are starting to come. And this game against a really impressive Brighton team, in their home ground as well, I mean, that's justification for how he's right to persist with his system so far.
Yeah, it's funny to see the attack come good, like you say, and Sarr getting some goals. Because I think going into this game, I think Mark Gahey was their second top scorer this season. So we are seeing some improvements from Palace, definitely. And Sarr is one of those players that at Watford he showed what he was capable of in flashes, and we knew that he was going to be a frightening attacking player. I think for a long time he was linked to some pretty big clubs.
Yeah.
And he I think Watford priced him out of a move when they got relegated. I know Villa were trying to bring him in at one point. I think Liverpool were being talked about as well. I think even United. He ended up in Marseille, and for Palace to bring him back to England and for Glasner to get the best out of him, that's an excellent bit of recruitment. And they needed that because replacing Elise was always going to be hard, and it's not a direct replacement. They're very different players. But if Glasner can make this player fit his system, then yeah, excellent. And I think they'll probably continue to develop that squad and bring more players of that sort of ilk in to suit their play. But you're right. How many players can we say that Palace are producing or kind of giving those opportunities to that we see flourish? Mitchell's a great example. Criminally overlooked for England for a really long time when we're desperate for a left back. I think it won't be long before that's a consideration. And Chalobah obviously was an excellent signing on loan where I think a lot of clubs missed an opportunity there and Palace pounced upon it. And
Very true, yeah.
We said at the start of the season we thought Palace were going to be a really promising side. They had a really difficult start. It's not a surprise to me to see that their form is going to pick up now.
No, I think you can see where they obviously need improvement as well. I think Mateta is still not a great source of goals consistently. He seems to be like a quite streaky forward. Eddie Nketiah has not really hit the ground running, has he, with Palace so far, their big signing. In fact, they haven't had much luck in recruitment department this summer at all, have they really? I think both their signings have been sporadically playing. So I think they do need to invest in January, and I think in an actual forward, a number 9, a striker to score some goals and take the burden off the usual suspects, I think is something that they really need. Brighton, on the other hand, another game where they absolutely bossed possession and didn't win. I think it's the second game in a row they've done that, isn't it? And Fabian Hurstler obviously looks increasingly frustrated, I think, by his team's inability to just finish chances. Are you worried about Brighton at all?
No, it's still early days with a new coach, isn't it? A young coach who's trying to develop his team. They've had a lot of turnover in their playing squad as well, and there's clearly a lot of bright points there. So I don't think Brighton have anything to worry about. It's so indicative of what this season has been like. Because one week a team looks like they're the ones knocking on the door of the top 4. They look like they're going to break up the big boys, and they look really threatening, like Brighton. And then 2 bad results, and all of a sudden we're going, they're floundering in mid-table, and now Man United are catching them up. They must be terrible. It's noticeable how quick these things change. So
it makes podcasting really hard, though, doesn't it? Like every week we're like, who's the crisis club now? Like we just don't know. It's crazy. Yeah. It was Palace a few weeks ago, weirdly, and we were sort of saying how great Brighton were, and a couple of results down the line, I'm like, are Brighton okay? Chelsea 2, Brentford 1 though. Chelsea are definitely okay. And this was a really entertaining game. I thought Brentford was a really tough game for them, but Brentford away are not a really tough opposition lately, are they? But they made it difficult. I think Chelsea deserved the win. They're a really impressive team at the minute. Madueke assist, Enzo Fernandez assist, another goal for Nicholas Jackson as well. So some impressive, consistent performances there.
Nicholas Jackson is quietly an excellent striker, capable of absolute madness. Like his goal was so good. Like he took it incredibly well. And then not long before that, he ballooned one over the bar, standing still, open goal from 6 yards out. Like, I don't know what to expect of it.
I know.
I think he's fantastic, though. I do think there's a real talent there that will continue to flourish. Like, obviously, Emery had him at Villarreal and loved him and tried to bring him to Villa, but he was injured, so we didn't get him that January, and he's gone to Chelsea, and it's been really fruitful for him. And I think with all the turnover in playing squad that they have and the amount of options they've got in attacking positions, the fact that he's still being relied on as their number 9, despite a lot of criticism in his opening season, which actually statistically was a pretty good opening season.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we'll see him really flourish in that number 9 role for Chelsea, and I think they have to be considered contenders now. What, 2 points behind Liverpool? I know Liverpool have got a game in hand. They don't seem to be going anywhere.
No, well, the seasonal fixtures just pile up, and I think how they deal with that will be telling. But their squad is fresh; it's fresher than most, and I think that might be key for them.
The depth for it.
Yeah, Newcastle 4, Leicester 0. Ruud van Nistelrooy's first defeat. I think it's come on the road as well, which is no surprise really. I think Leicester have had this coming. Like, ever since he's taken charge, they've really ridden their luck. Van Nistelrooy is such a gung-ho manager. They've conceded so many shots on target and somehow managed to get results. So I feel like this thumping was coming, don't you?
This could have been 8 or 9 as well. If Newcastle had been a bit more clinical, this could have been really embarrassing. But yeah, it's hard to predict what Newcastle are going to do game in, game out. So I'm not surprised that Leicester didn't really have the right plan for them, because you never know who you're going to be really facing. And you just saw the individual qualities of some of the players that Newcastle have managed to bring into this squad. Like, Isak he's such a sensational forward on his day, isn't he? Like,
yeah,
for
definitely.
someone so sort of tall, his footwork is impeccable. Like, he controls the ball so well, and he's willing to run at defenders in a way that you're not really used to of a number 9 like that. Like, he drops a lot deeper and brings the ball forward, but in a really like lightning quick way. Not like a Harry Kane figure who wants to drop deep and provide. He wants to drop deep and then run back forward again. I really like him as a player. I think he's got another elite move in him at some point.
I think Newcastle have got some players that just have dropped off a bit because of their form in recent seasons, but are actually really talented. And I think Hall doesn't really get as much of a mention as he should. Obviously made his England debut this season, played really well. I don't think there's anything to worry about with Newcastle. They just need to spend some money. And who'd have thought we'd be saying that when they got taken over by the Saudi investment fund?
Yeah.
But yeah, their squad looks a little bit stale, and they needed these goals, didn't they? But another team that needed goals is Arsenal. They drew 0-0 with Everton to wrap up our podcast. What is going on with Arsenal? Jesus Christ. Like, it feels like they're squandering chances to close the gap all the time. And these are games that they should be winning. Fair play to Everton. They dug in really well in the way that a Sean Dyche team should, and haven't done enough this season. But even so, with what Arsenal have, they look a bit predictable now. That's the only thing for me. It's all down that right-hand side. There's nothing on the left for them. They've got to solve that, really, haven't they?
They feel so out of ideas. It feels like if it's not Odegaard looking for Saka, then it's them playing for a corner. I don't really know. They're not entertaining to watch like they have been over the years, because I'll be honest, as much as it pains me to say this, I live in East London with Arsenal fans in my family. I have actually really enjoyed watching Arsenal over the last couple of years. They've been really competitive. They've played amazing football. Yeah. They've scored a lot of goals. And this season, they're still producing really good numbers, but the football they play is dire to watch at times. Like, it's just boring. Because, yeah, you're right, it's so predictable. It's basically, can Odegaard find Saka to produce something magic? And if they can't, I don't know what's going to happen there. Yeah. And they clearly need a better option on the left. They need their midfield to kind of look for paths down the middle a bit more and not always rely on going out over to the right-hand side. Because we saw when Odegaard got injured, they really missed him. If Saka got injured, can you imagine this Arsenal team? They'd be stuffed.
One of the most one-dimensional attacks, I think, in the league, and to think that they're title contenders, and to be fair, we tipped them for the title, all three of us at the start of this season. Seems a little bit short-sighted now, but something's got to give with Arsenal, otherwise it's curtains for them in the title, I think. It's not many points they can afford to drop, really, is it?
Yeah, and I don't really know who the obvious options are for them to bring in now. Like, there's not a player out there that I look at and go, that's achievable for Arsenal to bring him in, and actually he solves their problems on the left. Like, who's the winger that would come in and suit Arteta's system? Like, they obviously wanted Nico Williams. I don't think they'll finance a move for him. I can't see that happening. It feels like every other winger in the world plays for Chelsea, so they're probably not going to buy anyone from them. I'm not sure what Arsenal do next, and obviously they've lost Edu now as well, so their recruitment's going to be different regardless. But I don't know, another year where they underperform.
Got Raheem Sterling though. Why have they got Sterling at all? He's just not playing, is he? Like, what? I don't know.
He's obviously not showing enough in training, is he, to prove to Arteta that he's got that sharpness. But I feel like this should have been the year. Like, obviously Liverpool's performances have been excellent, and keeping up with them is going to be hard. But when you see the way that Man City are playing, such a golden opportunity for Arsenal, who their fans will often say that the reason they've not won a title is because they're competing against Man City and they're the best team in the world. Well, they're not right now, and you're still not winning
Absolutely.
it. I think questions have to be asked about Arteta at some point.
Well, as we record this on the Monday evening, it's Bournemouth versus West Ham as we speak. It's still 0-0 as we're recording. But next weekend, we might be talking about how Bournemouth are challenging for a Champions League place. That's the nature of the league at the minute, isn't it? But next weekend's fixtures look really, really tasty, don't they? As we get towards this festive fixture pile-up, is there anything that stands out for you next weekend? Villa, for example?
Villa City, yeah. If we beat City next week, we go above them. But inevitably, it'll be the game where they find their feet again and spank us somehow.
Yeah, it's an unpredictable league, that's for sure. But it just makes podcasting difficult and interesting in equal measure. That's it for this week's pod. I'll reiterate everything I do every week in the same way. Please do follow us, like us, subscribe wherever you can. On YouTube would be a massive boost for us. And we're on Blue Sky now, as Myles has alluded to. Another tight race at the top is how many followers we can both find. Just follow us both. Follow the pod while you're there. And interact and engage. I think we really enjoy having a bit of back and forth with fans from other Premier League clubs.
Absolutely.
And we are still on TikTok too. So if you're on there, find us there too to find short form versions of our content. But until next week's final one before the Christmas period, thank you, mate. And I'll speak to you then.
Cheers, bud.
See you soon.